What are we talking about? Sorry,
Scams.
my brain's still half. Alright, hello everybody. Welcome back to our regularly scheduled content. This week we have Hash.
Hi.
And he'll be talking about scams 101, 201 and 301. So Hash, take it away.
Thank you. All right. As you said, this week's talk will be about scams, and a little notice before I start: content in this talk is for educational purposes only. I'm not a lawyer, and obviously I'm not responsible for what you do with this information. Some of it can be a little disheartening, or whatever you call it, when you see a lot of scams. Moving on, a quick intro about myself. My name is Haoxi. You can find me on Hash on Discord. I just graduated my Bachelor of IT and UQ about a year ago. I'm currently doing my Masters of Cybersec. I have a few cybersecurity certificates, makes it very useful to get jobs. I'm the ex-president of UQ Cyber Squad. I love Linux and Unix and dislike Microsoft with a passion. And I really like DevOps and cloud. So in my spare time, I like reading, listening to music, and downloading viruses onto my computer. You can also find me on Twitter and GitHub using that handle if you use those things. Okay, so a bit of an outline on this talk. Again, wanting potentially distressing and visually unappealing content ahead. So first we'll talk about some types of common scams and spams. The broader type is really technology-enabled social engineering is what I would call this. We'll take a look at criminal targets and business models. So what they do, why they want to target people, and how they make money. And then a very useful take-home point on what actually happens when you click on a link. Are you hacked straight away? What happens? And a bit of myth busting, and then followed by finally a bit of offensive reconnaissance on the infrastructure behind people who do scams, and then how to and where to report things. So let's go. This is more of a meme that I made called the sus matrix, and can people see the slides online? Yeah, cool. So I like to think of scams with kind of two axes. One is impact and one is interaction. And by interaction, I mean interaction with the scammer themselves. So, for example, the low interaction with scammer types are just things that you get online that you click and then you get hacked. And the higher interaction ones are based on a long chain of SMS, emails, a lot of calling, and then for example, some of these scams, the higher interaction they are, sort of the longer they take and the more they want out of you. For example, if you have things like the Nigerian prince email scam, you would usually communicate for months or weeks at least before they ask you about different things, ask you about more details in your life, get as much information as they can before they attempt to blackmail you, or in terms of romance scams, ask you to send a large sum of money, or in investment scams, run away with your third or fourth investment of $1 million. And then note that just because the interaction is low doesn't mean that the impact is low as well. A lot of people do get scammed when Elon Musk tweets with his hacked account. Here, you can double your Bitcoin by sending us your Bitcoin here, and then we'll send you back double the amount. A lot of people send a lot of money and they get scammed. So stuff like that. Right, so let's talk a bit about business models, what the bad guys want and why. The end goal is most of the time always money. So if they're looking for, let's say, phishing your organization credentials, they want to sell your initial access into larger networks. For example, if you're a UQ student or staff, they might start selling that in a forum somewhere, and then criminals can use that to further hack into your organization. If it's things like social media or webmail accounts, they have bots that sell followers, for example, buy a bunch of really high quality hacked Twitter or Facebook accounts and then use that to sell followers to someone else, or use it in things like romance scams by using a very nicely laid out profile that they hack, and then they use it to instant message their friends and ask for other things. Personal information, usually only for selling or bulk advertising, very occasionally blackmailing unless they're targeting you. Credit card, obviously money laundering, they just want to buy a bunch of stuff from Amazon and sell it afterwards. If they are installing malware on your device or something like a malicious browser extension, they really want to do things like steal financial information, as well as selling that access as part of like a botnet, for example, using a whole lot of infected machines to DDoS a website. So cybercrime is a rapidly growing and organized business. And by organized, I mean the bad guys really have things like project management, they have HR, they have legal teams and stuff like that to make sure that they can stay out of trouble and be the most efficient they can. Okay, another note is that criminals are rapidly getting more and more professional. It's getting to that point where sometimes it's really hard to distinguish between what is a legitimate online adult casino business and what is a credit card scam. Scams are getting more sophisticated. Criminals are getting their web designs right. So it's gone are the days where anything online that is a scam is really ugly and has flashy banners everywhere, and you can instantly tell that it's just not right. A lot of scam sites now use proper HTTPS, so you really can't trust your browser when it has a little lock on top that says, use this website is secure. It just means that the communication is encrypted, doesn't mean that the website is safe. They use things like reCAPTCHAs as well and other kinds of like WAF/content delivery network technology to protect their websites from spam as well. So sometimes before you go into a malicious website, you have to fill out a reCAPTCHA just to get there. So the criminals are really trying to protect themselves. Bundled malware and adware, they come with real legitimate software. So sometimes when you download software from websites, they have really bad kind of advertising practices, and it will come bundled with a bunch of stuff that you really don't want on your computer that are somewhat pseudo-malicious. Things like phishing sites can bypass multi-factor authentication. You would think that once, my account has MFA, it must be safe from attackers. In a way, MFA protects you if they have already stolen your credential and are trying to log in. It doesn't protect you from getting phished. So for example, I'll do a little demo video later on how that works, but a lot of the times they will actually log you into the real website. They will pass your stolen credentials to like actual Gmail and actual Outlook, and you will actually get that MFA code on your phone. You will type it in, and they will be able to get your real credentials, and then you won't know about it because they'll redirect you to a real website already logged in. Oh, that looks like my email. That's fine. Things like investment and romance scams take longer time, and they actually, for example, investment scams will actually pay you real money for a while. If you invest like, let's try with $100, what happens? They'll give you $200 back, and then you keep going. And then when you reach a certain large sum, they will run away with all your money. So it's brutal out there. All right, first type of very common, scam/spam on the internet is malvertising. This is a few snippets that I've taken from the internet. Some of it is very distressing. Some of it looks really legit, like this Google-like VPN suggestion from the internet with a broken font, I suppose. Things like downloading free books, registering for in online free access that requires your credit card. So stuff like this is generally obvious. They can appear on any website. Sometimes the websites that host this content are not very aware of the kind of content they're hosting, because they would just contact the third-party advertiser and be like, I want to make money by hosting a website, so I'll just sell ads to anyone that wants to buy them, and some of these ads end up to be very malicious. They're usually also part of pop-ups and redirects. So if you're visiting a shady website and a bunch of pop-ups appear, 99% of the time those are all scams. You can close them all. Download links are the most dangerous in this case, because unless you type in the information or you actually execute some kind of malware that's downloaded from the internet, you're still safe. Also, they try to get your credit card information by doing things like signups. So some of the really social telltale signs are they really try to convey urgency. For example, your computer is hacked and has a virus, or your IP address is leaked, download VPN now, that kind of thing. Or they try to give you free stuff, hot signals in your area. Not quite usually how it works. And then some more kind of email/SMS phishing. So this is usually untargeted spam. Spam's usually not targeted at a specific account. They just kind of get a large, like they will buy a large list of email addresses or phone numbers from advertisers, and they will just use that to do these kind of things like, oh, a user just logged into your Facebook account from a new device. You should, click on the link, report the user, and you click on it, and it redirects you to a fake Facebook login page, for example. Note that they can come through any channels. Attackers are being very creative. For example, if some of you use Signal, which is supposedly a very secure app, criminals do send stuff over Signal as well. So if you use Gmail or anything with good filtering, this kind of stuff will usually end up in spam. It's when you use when there are instant messaging apps like WhatsApp, Signal, that don't usually filter or inspect any content that will end up in your messages. It can be tailored slightly to your name or device or IP address, because sometimes when your data gets sold to third parties, it will include what device you used when you visited a website, or which IP address it comes from, which can be traced back to your city. So that's why you get things like, you're in Brisbane, there are 40 single moms in your local area, waiting for you, that kind of thing. For names, usually it's they will take the first bit of your email address and be like, hey John, that kind of thing, if you have a name in your email address. It sometimes attempts to spoof a legitimate service. That's kind of how you can tell. Google, Facebook, sometimes even Auspost. So they spoof the post office or DHS delivery to try to trick you into giving up information. So when you encounter these types of spam, as long as you don't enter any of your personal information or login details, you're okay. A note on things like untargeted sextortion. Sometimes it will send you an email with your email address as the sender. That doesn't mean that they got into your inbox. 99% of the time, it's because your organization doesn't have proper email spoofing protection on that specific address or domain, and they will send you an email with your exact email address telling you, hey, I've compromised your account and your computer and everything, and I've seen all your porn history, blah, blah, blah. If you don't send me Bitcoin, I'll put them on the internet, that kind of thing. So don't worry if someone spoofs your email address. Most of the time your email is not compromised. Okay, on to more higher interaction scams. So there would be emails with pretexting, because companies are getting their mail filters better and better every day, and they would look for very suspicious things like urgency queues. They will look for links, they will look for attachments. So when they try to send malicious links and attachments, a lot of the times they will get blocked by the filter. So what criminals tend to do nowadays sometimes is that they will send a very simple message that really doesn't have much words. For example, this email that just says, hello, how are you today? That ended up in my Gmail. And when you respond to those emails and start a conversation with that person, they will reply to you, with more content, and that second response is less likely to be filtered because your email provider sees that you've already started a conversation with them. And this is also quite common in terms of actually targeted phishing. It could be fun to play around with some of these scammers and see the long blurb or the stories that they tell you, but I recommend doing it in a throwaway email account. For phone calls, they usually start with robocall, because if you think about the amount of work that somebody has to do if they just sit in a call center and constantly pick up the phone to call new numbers, that's a lot more work than if they robo-dial 50,000 users at once, and then when you pick up, it says something like, you have an emergency delivery, press 1 for human service. And then when you do go into human service, then it gets through to an operator, and then they ask you your details, and etc. So things like delivery, police arrest, embassy calls are very common with phone calls. And then there are romance scams. So they are usually combined with some sort of credit card fraud or scam sites, but they delivered through dating and chatting apps, such as Tinder, Snapchat. So when people randomly message you, like, oh, check out my nudes, don't fall for that. And then again, investment scams from things like high growth funds, cryptocurrency, NFTs are very popular. Just beware of if you're trying to invest in something or buy cryptocurrency, get them from official big sources that you trust, because the thing about sending money abroad is if it goes to a different country or let's say somewhere in Europe, it's very hard for the police or even your bank to get your money back. Obviously, especially if it's crypto, it's almost impossible. But if it's like a bank transfer, it's really hard for financial companies to get your money back if it goes to a different place, unless you report it like on the minute. All right, so let's go to some meaty kind of technical stuff of what actually happens when you click on a link. So a lot of people would ask, oh no, I clicked on something that appears to be a bad link. Is my device compromised? Is my Facebook account hacked? The short answer is probably not. So starting with the kind of interactionless elements, I will go over data that can be collected about you before you do anything on a website. So first thing is when you send a web request, you will send something called HTTP headers. That's how the web protocol kind of works. And inside the headers, by default, there are certain fields that give quite detailed information about your device. So for example, this user agent field header is one of the most juicy headers. By default, your browser or your application will have its own specific user agent. So in this case, you can see that it included my operating system, Ubuntu, Linux, even the architecture of my CPU. It would include the version of my browser engine and my actual browser. And it also has things like accept language, which will send your preferred language of your system. So for most of us, that would be English. But why this seemingly sensitive information is included in the headers is because websites can use this information to determine how to serve content to you. So for example, if your accept language is Russian or Chinese or Japanese, the website will try to translate or serve a different version of the site according to your preferred language. And for user agent, obviously if you're using a mobile phone or instead of a laptop, the website will try to tailor the experience to your mobile device, which is a good thing. They can also be used to detect if you're lying about your user agent, which can happen. And certain applications like WhatsApp or Discord will have their own sort of user agent sometimes when they visit websites. So you can tell if the user is visiting from an app, like a preview instead of an actual browser. And then there are third-party cookies. You've probably heard the thing that cookies are bad, not all the time. But how third-party cookies work is they allow a third-party site to track the sites that you're visiting. And this is how Google, quote, knows about your browsing history. It's because a lot of websites will embed trackers in here to their own domain. For example, you can see a Facebook here, you can see Google here, and Bing as well. And it's mostly to track what websites you have visited for targeted advertisements. In terms of malicious websites, they will often have a lot of blockers, a lot of trackers in at once, so that they basically maximize profit. The more trackers they can put on their website, these trackers will give them a bit of money for the advertising ad revenue that they return. So if you install a browser extension such as Privacy Badger, it would block a lot of these third-party trackers by default. And if not block it, it will disable cookies so that they don't actually track anything. And then JavaScript, the doom of humankind. JavaScript-based browser fingerprinting is very powerful. So what they can collect is things like your screen size, the fonts that are installed in your system, if you have a GPU, what kind of audio device you use, what kind of graphics library you use, and then based on all of these information, they can come up with something like a hash to uniquely identify your browser. So even if you're using something like a VPN or a proxy, which hides your IP address, sometimes websites can still track you individually because your browser fingerprint is a lot different than someone else's. So this is kind of like the overall table of what I just described in the last 3 slides. So for HTTP headers, you can spoof them. You can use a different browser, or you can install extensions to change your user agent to appear from somewhere else. For example, if I'm on Linux, I can spoof my user agents to websites to let them think that I'm coming from like an Android device. You can disable JavaScript or install extensions that block like specific browser fingerprinting. For cookies, you can block third-party cookies by usually somewhere in your browser settings, or you can install extensions. And for your network, because your IP address and your rough geolocation based on your IP address is usually sent to the server, you can use a proxy or a VPN to hide your real IP address. So although this seems like a large amount of information to be collected by any third-party website, it's usually not enough to get you hacked just by clicking on a link. So the only really real 4 ways to be hacked when you click on a bad link is if you've entered your personal information, such as your name, address, credit card, and sometimes you don't even have to click the submit button because there could be JavaScript on the websites that log everything you type. So as you're typing in your credit card details, they would send every character to a server so that you don't even have to click on anything. Your information's already gone. If you give your login credentials, or if you use the same email and password to register to a different site, that's still giving your credentials away. Because if you think about it, if you use the same email and password to register to a third-party site, and you use the same one to log into your email, then attackers can use the same thing to log into your other accounts. If you download and execute a file, most of the time exe files, or things like Flash and Java applets are also in this category, then your computer is probably compromised because Flash and Java applets most of the time have some kind of exploit or system level access that allow them to execute code. Obviously, if it's an exe, that's game over unless you have good antivirus that blocks that. In the most rare case, if your browser is out of date and vulnerable to some kind of exploit, like if you're using Internet Explorer, or if you don't keep your Chrome or Firefox, or a lot of the time your iPhone Safari browser up to date, then in the very rare case that you're being targeted, or you visit a website that's like a watering hole hosting an exploit that's targeted for your operating system, that's when you can get hacked. This is rare because browser security is a big area and people are constantly working on it. So it's not every day that this happens. If you didn't do 1, 2, 3, clicking on a link is usually fine if you like exploring around the internet, given that you're comfortable with giving some of this information away. Okay, let's look at telltale signs of a scam site. Long domain name without dots. So the longer the domain name is, the cheaper it is to register. And criminals obviously want to be financially efficient, so they would do a really long domain name. And because sometimes when you have a really long domain name in smaller devices like a mobile phone, the bits of the domain name that's too long is going to be hidden from the browser. So you might just see Microsoft Online, and then the rest of the random blob of the domain name is redacted. So that's how they fool the user. If it's a new domain registration, that's also likely to be malicious. If it requests credit card information and rego, if you have some kind of crappy UI design, that's usually a sign as well. If they have placeholder links, such as social media links that go to like nowhere, or if they have WordPress. I don't really like saying this. I hate WordPress. It is used in a lot of legitimate websites, but so many times it's not. And if it like comes from a Gmail address, or there's a Gmail address somewhere on the website for contact support, that probably means that they're not a legitimate business. A lot of criminals like to use Gmail just because it appears legit. So let's talk about how a scam site is put up. Usually they first decide to target audience, design some kind of bait, and then they register multiple domain names at a time for efficiency. And sometimes they use things like compromised websites, usually WordPress, or some kind of software as a service product, such as Google Forms, Microsoft Forms, Google Drive to host malicious content. They usually use what's called bulletproof hosting, which is usually some kind of European company that doesn't respond to takedown requests. So if I'm a police agency or some kind of CERT team that I email them and say, hey, this website specifically that you're hosting is malicious, please take it down. The bulletproof hosting providers are the ones that don't give a crap and they just leave them up. And then they will obtain SSL certificates for encryption so that the website will look safe, because how browser security has advanced, a lot of browsers will warn you if a website is not encrypted to begin with. So that's obviously bad for business, and then they proactively contact victims to send phishing links. So on the right or left here, you can see a large, so I just pulled this out of a feed about 2 days ago, and it's a large list of steamcommunity.com titles. And as you can see, because this feed is time-based, all of these domains are registered around the same time. And they're all trying to target Steam credentials. You can see that they make a lot of different registrations, and sometimes it's really 1 or 2 characters off. So if you're not a careful user, you wouldn't even notice. And you can notice the amount of .com domains in here. .com domains are not necessarily expensive. A lot of times it will pay off. If the domain name is long enough, it's really not that expensive. And this is a very long domain name that I kind of warned you about. So on a mobile phone, the URL will cut off around here so that all you see on your mobile phone is Steam Community Com Trade Offer, and it looks legit, and then the rest of it is garbage. If you would like to take a look at like the new feeds, you can try this URL. I'll put the slides somewhere later so everyone can read them. Okay, so around the process, when they design the bait, is something too good to be true? Usually is. When they register multiple domain names, you want to look for similar domains in age. So there are tools to check if this website is similar to many other ones and how long ago this website was put up. I'll show you that later. And for things like compromised websites or software as a service, you want to look for things like, is it a really old or potentially hacked website by going to its homepage and checking the content? Is it hosted on things like Microsoft Forms or Google Drive? And then for bulletproof hosting, you want to check the IP address of the website. Where is it located? Is it in Europe? Is it in Russia? The kind of suspicious countries. What provider is it? Is it some kind of bulletproof provider? You can tell by just Googling the name of the provider most of the time. When they obtain SSL certificates, which certificate authority are they getting it from? And how recently was this certificate registered? Because a different timestamp is usually used for when you obtain the SSL certificate and when you register the domain name. It's not instantly synced. Let's Encrypt is a very common certificate authority for phishing sites, just because it's completely free. But a lot of companies use Let's Encrypt as well, obviously. So, and then for proactively contacting victims, think about where this link came from. Did you proactively contact that person first, or did that person text you first? Okay, so I'll show you now how to, or I guess a tool to check a website's validity as well as different information. So, I'll take this example of xinfinity or billy.xyz, which is like not even a good domain. The tool that I'll be using is called urlscan.io. It's a really, really good tool because you can see it provides you with information, like a little summary that says, what's the main IP address of the website, where is it located. So here it's in Seychelles, which is like a country that I haven't even heard of. That's the hosting provider, and that's the main domain. And where is it, which certificate authority created the TLS certificate, and then when was it created. So you can see that this one is super recent, and it's only valid for 3 months. So it's probably not a legit website. And then it will give you a similar count of how many other websites that look just like this one, based on the domain, based on the IP address, and based on the content hosted. And it give you a verdict at the end that says, is it malicious? This is not an accurate verdict. A lot of the times, phishing sites and other kind of scams are really creative in bypassing these things, because they can literally put the site up and then they will check these tools, or they will check things like VirusTotal, Google Safe Browsing, until that, and they will check it in a way that until it's not detected, then they'll host the site up. So I will give you a little example. Hopefully, yeah. So if I click on similar, you can see that this effective URL path is repeated many, many times. And if you click on any of these websites, you can see that the screenshot's exactly the same. And you can even see what brand or company it's targeting. And this one is SharePoint, which is Microsoft's login. So if you look at the full image of the screenshot, you can see first you actually have to prove that you're not a robot, so you might have to do some kind of reCAPTCHA, and then it says you've been invited to view a PDF file, session will expire, and then obviously this will redirect you to a login page, and they will try to get your Outlook credentials, and also potentially get you to download a file that's malicious. So yeah, this similar count is very, very powerful. Also something interesting is if you look at the IP detail, so what this PTR record is, it's called a pointer, a reverse pointer record, which is when you try to resolve an IP address to a domain name instead of the other way around. And it actually shows that it's a .ru domain when the country is Seychelles. So when you look at a .ru, it's probably suspicious, unless you're going on Yandex or something. Obviously, I'm very biased because I'm not Russian, but... Okay, so let's talk about top sus root domains. As you can see, XYZ, because it's incredibly cheap. .info, it's probably bad. Anything with dynamic DNS in it. The thing about DDNS, dynamic DNS is usually free to register for, so criminals love just putting a lot of domains on there. And the IP address can change anytime, so it's very easy to design. It's very easy to put up a bunch of these. .tk because it's free, .ru because it's in Russia. This, I don't know why. .us is also sometimes used. I'm not sure, because this is a actual legit domain for, the country of the United States, I think. But not a lot of legitimate websites use it, and most websites use this for malicious purposes. Sometimes .cn, .life is a popular one because a lot of people just assume that it's from Microsoft for some reason. MS, Microsoft, for the same reason. .me, Microsoft. GitHub.io. This is an interesting one because GitHub, if people use GitHub here, it's starting to get a bit of a malware problem, because it's a free hosting site. Anyone can just put code on there, and you can give people the link to download your code, and sometimes the code can be an artifact, it can be an image, it can be an exe, it can be malware. And then GitHub has GitHub Pages, which is free hosting for your websites. And because of so many organizations use GitHub, things like github.com, github.io is not likely to be blacklisted anywhere or banned because of how critical it is. So a lot of criminals will actually host their phishing page straight on github.io or other kinds of scam sites, and then they will use that front end to then post your credentials somewhere else. .com, as you can see, very common, .net, and then .to as well. Okay, let's talk about offensive countermeasures. So I think I got the order of my slide wrong. Where did the other... I think I wanted to show a different slide. Okay, I wanted to show you something called Shodan, which is kind of like a search engine for the internet. So if I go shodan.io, it's exposing all my browsing history. So it's a search engine for the internet of everything. And basically what Shodan gives you is if you type in an IP address that Shodan has already scanned, it will give you a bunch of information about it, including like what organization it belongs to, what web technologies it uses, what vulnerabilities are on it, what ports are open. For example, if it's hosting a login SSH server or a mail server and stuff like that. And usually the more ports it has, the more sus the IP address is. But if I type in this IP address from Seychelles, I'm not sure if they have it, but I just want to show you this and try. Hopefully. Okay, awesome. So you can see kind of exactly where the hosting provider is located. You can see the different ports. This one's for DNS. You can see the kind of server that it uses, even spits out like it's running Red Hat Linux. You can see that it's running web servers. You can see what kind of web technologies are hosted in this IP. Note that one IP address can host multiple websites. And I think this is how the domains work. They all point to the same IP. It's .89. No, they don't. They just use the same provider. And then you can see their SSL certificate, which is also quite useful for a legitimate business. That's usually like not a valid email address for what a business would use on their certificate. You can see the HTTPS, you can see the email servers, and if you are someone that likes hacking, you can see the vulnerabilities. They don't have any, which is good or bad. But also, this guy on YouTube has a lot of he just loves messing around with scammers for fun, or for YouTube, I guess. And he does things like go on call with scammers for hours straight just to waste their time so that they can't call anyone else. And they do things like, scammer, backs me to stop shopping after this guy probably got the scammer's credit card information and just keep buying stuff. So if you want some inspiration on how to mess with scammers, watch this YouTube channel. This slide is like a joke. I would never recommend you to ever use any of these payloads just to log in and break scam sites, because that's completely illegal, and I would never put an exploit database here that you can use to exploit vulnerabilities that you can find on Shodan on scammer's IP address. I would never do any of these things, so please don't. Cool. Okay. More tools for investigation and exploration. Tor browser is really good because if you want anonymity online, the Tor network will basically route you through 3 different countries or 3 different nodes before they get to the final destination through an overlay network. So your IP address is almost never exposed, and it has really strict security controls against things like JavaScript and browser fingerprinting. If you want so I'll show you what Tor browser does. This is Tor browser. If I enter an address like google.com, or maybe even this malicious website, because I'm feeling cute today. Maybe Google on one side. Some organizations block Tor, but I'm glad that YouTube doesn't. And by default, Tor also blocks cookies. So sites like Google will be you gotta enable cookies, and this is what we use cookies for. Obviously, I think this is German. Does anyone know what language this is? Yeah, anyway, that's because if I look at my Tor circuit, it's going to Latvia and the Netherlands and I'm going to Google. So it thinks that I'm from Netherlands, and that's why it's displaying in this language. The good thing about Tor is everyone that uses Tor has the same browser configuration, so it can't really tell. It can't really give a very good idea of a unique fingerprint for you as this browser, and anytime you can just like make a new Tor circuit and then it will change everything again. Yes, I like cookies. Doesn't even let me click. If you search something like my IP, sometimes it can't even like tell you your IP, or it will block you. When you use Tor, because so many malicious things use Tor for the purpose of anonymity, a lot of websites will block you. Or you will come up against like a lot of reCAPTCHAs to prove that you're not a robot. You have to do it like 5 times just because the AI thinks you're bad in general. I think this website's probably already been taken down, so that's cool. So yeah, Tor browser is super useful if you want to just click on random links. A less paranoid option will be Firefox containers. That's an extension you can download in Firefox, and basically, if I go to add-ons with themes, yeah, it's this Firefox multi-account containers, and what you can do is create containers for different purposes, and cookies can never like cross between containers. So you can defeat things like third-party cookie tracking just by having containers. Your browser dev tools are super useful. So you can, do the inspect element thing and feel like a hacker man. So if you do inspect element and you go to your network tab, I'm using Firefox, but this is available on other browsers as well, and you reload the page, it'll actually show you every single request that your web browser is making on that tab. So you can see all the request methods and all the URLs that it's going to, and all the response codes. And you can look at things like, I want to look at my response headers and my request headers. So you can see the user agent that it's sending, you can see referrers, and for response headers, this is really good for determining like what kind of technology is used by this web server, because you can look at things like, I don't know, does it give you anything? Content security policy. Yeah, not for this website. Oh, Nginx, so that you can see the web server being used, etc. Closing that. VirusTotal is great for if you downloaded some malicious file or potentially malicious file and you want to kind of check if that's a virus. You can just upload a random file here. URL scan, like I introduced before. If you want to like stalk your spammer or something, you can go on osintframework.com, and what that is a giant kind of, it's a lot of links for like how to look up something. So if you want to like, I want to find domain name related information, it's got like all these resources that you can use, and these are like all online tools that you can look up a domain name from. So this is a really good tool if you like want to professionally stalk people in general. Melanator.com is a public email inbox. So if you want to sign up for like some spam site, you can just type in like a username that's like, try to be unique about it. Like email, very unique. So this will go to like email@melanator.com. Obviously this is like full of romance, I guess you can say. So this is a public inbox. So if you sign up for anything, the email will, appear here. I'm not going to click on any of these because that's probably not safe for work. And then fakenamegenerator.com is absolutely awesome because when you sign up to things, they will typically like ask for your name and your address. So you can just like fill in a random one. They'll give you the address. If you need like some email address that's not, cool. You can do things like fill in a username and a password. That's my user agent. Don't steal it. And then you can even they even generate a fake credit card for you. Most of the time, fake credit cards don't work anymore because sites that want to steal your credit card information actually have channels to verify that credit card and charge it. So you can put this in if you're trying to bypass something, but probably not going to work. So yeah, this is really useful if you just want a random name. Every time you refresh, it gives you something different. Very good. Yeah, and then a bit of myth busting. Website has a green lock on it, must be safe to enter my details. No, that just means it's encrypted. Website looks pretty and legit, must be safe, not really. Okay, this is the two-factor authentication bypass I want you to see. So, Obviously, account.phishing.evil.domain.dev is not a legitimate Google account. Right. So he's just going to this website. Looks very much like Google. Click sign in. Still looks very much like Google. Types in his actual Google account username. Types in his real password, very long password. And then boom, two-step authentication. And now he's going to pull out his phone, or probably his Mac. Real Google authentication code. Puts that in. Ooh, hijack this OTP token. And boom, he's in his Google. Everything real. So yeah, just because this website works with your actual MFA, don't trust it. It's very cool how this works if you want to look at the tool afterwards. Don't use this for evil purposes, obviously. All right. This random password is incorrect, must be a real login page. Also not true, because just like the bypass example, they will actually check your credentials against the real service to see if it's legit or not. And if someone has your IP address and tries to blackmail you, that's not a worry, just like reboot your router. They can't even, most of the time, do anything with your IP address anyway. Okay, useful browser plugins. Like I said before, Privacy Badger blocks third-party trackers. HTTPS everywhere is good to enforce HTTPS. Doesn't really help you that much, except like you won't be leaking your traffic to your ISP in plain text. Pop-up blockers are really good because, like I said, a lot of random spam on the internet are pop-ups. If you block pop-ups, you block a lot of them. Weaponizer is something that I'd like to use for analyzing the technologies used on a page. So it looks, I thought I had Weaponizer somewhere. I go to my add-ons, maybe. And I go to Weaponizer, and I go allow. Probably should not do that. But if I refresh the page, and then I look at Weaponizer, it will actually identify the technologies used on a website, which is really useful because, like I said, a lot of spammers use things like, I don't know, WordPress, or it's more informational than anything. Cloudflare is a common content delivery network that people use to both hide their real IP address of the website as well as protect it, because if you want to spam or brute force a malicious website, Cloudflare will block it because they don't know. Cloudflare doesn't know if it's a website that's malicious unless you report it to them. So they will keep protecting criminals as long as they're unaware. And automated internet systems are way faster than manual inspection. It's not like Cloudflare has employees to look at every single request and check if they're a real website. So Cloudflare is everywhere. Okay, how do you protect yourself? Do enable multi-factor authentication. I said that it doesn't help you if you're getting phished, but if your credentials are leaked, this is very useful, because then when the criminal tries to log in, they'll actually have to bypass it again. Use a password manager. Please do not reuse passwords for your websites, because if one of them is a malicious website that steals your password, or if one of them is compromised, all your accounts are gone. You can check if you've been hacked by going to haveibeenowned.com, which is a website done by Troy Hunt down Go Coast. He's a great guy. So you can just type in your email address. I should probably not type in my real email address. But yeah, if you type in your email address here, it will actually check. Should I? Yeah, I'll type in my uni address. Should be okay. Everyone has this anyway. Good news, no pwnage found. But if your email address is owned, maybe email@melanator.com would appear in a few places. There you go. And it will actually tell you which service it was breached from. So Adobe got hacked, Animoto got hacked, Apollo got hacked, all these companies got hacked. And basically, you can see exactly which details from your account has been hacked in all of these websites. Also conveniently shows me which websites I can log into using this email account because it's public inbox. But it's all even got a Dropbox. That's nice. Okay, yeah, great website to check for yourself. Okay, how do you do reporting? In Australia, ACCC, the Commission of Consumer something Commission, I do not remember. They have a service called Scam Watch. This is really good because it will show you all the common scams that happened recently, and you can report, for example, missed delivery, like I said, investment opportunities, computer takeover scams, culturally and linguistically diverse community. Oh, poor them. So yeah, these reports are really cool if you want to look at the latest scams. They even have a Twitter account. Twitter is great. You can click report and then fill out a little form. It's really quick, only takes 5 minutes. Netcraft takedown service is also really good, but this is more for something that's very obviously malicious. For example, if it's a Google phishing page or it has malware on something, this service will take it really seriously. If it's something like a, I don't know, online adult business or some kind of investment website that turns out to be an investment scam, if it's not immediately obvious to these people, they won't take it down. They'll just reply to you like, oh, we've checked it out, there's nothing malicious on it. If you have your identity stolen, for example, your driver's license, your text file number, your real home address, you can hit up these people, idcare.org, also Australian based. So they deal with identity fraud en masse. So they will give you like a little care package on this is how to, restore your identity. If you are being phished in your organization's inbox, such as UQ, report it to your organization's security team, obviously. At UQ, that's the CSOC. You can just search UQ CSOC or go search UQ cybersecurity and you can report an incident. You can also report it to the Australian Cybersecurity Centre. These guys take a while to respond if they get back to you at all. Oh no, this video is recorded, isn't it? This is more for like high-profile cybercrimes. So if you just give them a phishing page, I'm not sure if they do anything with it. But in your report, make sure that you include your information from the previous information gathering sources that I have discussed. Things like URL scan, screenshots, IP address of the website, how the scammer contacted you. It's really useful. And yeah, scams are very scary. My DMs are open if you need any help or advice on it. And that is the end of my talk. Keep calm and disconnect yourself from the internet. I shall unplug. Hopefully that doesn't break anything. Oh, anyone has any questions? Is there anything online? Maybe on the YouTube?
No questions.
No? Okay. That's it.
Very cool. Thanks, Haoxi.
No worries.
We have pizza over at UQ.